Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing on a bridge so crowded with life that you can't even see the river beneath your feet. The air thick with smoke, voices, the creak of carts, the smell of bread baking in shops built directly above rushing water. This isn't just any bridge. This is an entire neighborhood suspended in air, where people are born, live their entire lives, and die without ever truly leaving. This is Old London Bridge in the 1600s, and what you're about to discover will forever change how you see the past. London in the 17th century wasn't just large, it was exploding. Nearly 500,000 souls pressed together in a labyrinth of timber and stone. A living organism fed by the Thames, that great artery pumping trade, news, and life itself through the city's veins. But to understand London, you must first understand its heart, Old London Bridge. What I'm about to show you isn't your typical history lesson. Using cutting-edge AI, I've done something the original artists who painted these scenes could never imagine. I've stepped inside their paintings. I've shifted the camera, changed angles, walked through streets that vanished centuries ago. And what I found there will haunt you. The bridge that was a city. Let me tell you something that will blow your mind. Old London Bridge wasn't really a bridge at all. Not in the way we think of bridges today. Picture this. You're approaching from the north, past Street Magnus, the Martyrs' Church, and ahead of you rises what looks like a solid wall of buildings. Houses stacked on houses, shops spilling over shops. Some structures jutting so far out over the roadway that neighbors could shake hands across the street from their upper windows. This bridge was home to hundreds of people who never saw the water below them. The bridge rested on massive stone piers that choked the Thames like fingers around throat. The water, furious at being constrained, roared through the narrow arches with such violence that passing underneath in a boat was a gamble with death. Boatmen called it shooting the bridge, and they weren't being dramatic. Accidents were tragically common. The river would surge and drop, creating waterfalls that could flip vessels in an instant. And yet, life flourished here in defiance of every danger. Above the chaos of the water, above the constant thunder of hooves and cartwheels, families raised children. Bakers sold bread. Merchants haggled. Chapels offered prayer. Fire was an ever-present terror. One spark in this timber maze could doom hundreds. Congestion made every journey an ordeal. But for centuries, generation after generation chose to stay. Why? Because this bridge was more than a crossing. It was power incarnate, commerce embodied. London itself concentrated into a single impossible structure. And standing at its entrance, you would pass beneath reminders of that power that would chill your blood. But we'll come back to that. The river of empire. Beneath all this human drama, the Thames told its own story. If the bridge was London's heart, the river was its bloodstream. On any given day, the water teemed with life. Barges heavy with grain from England's interior, ferries shuttling passengers, merchant vessels from the continent unloading cloth and wine, smaller craft carrying coal, timber, and countless other goods that kept the city alive. The Thames didn't just connect London to England. It connected London to the world. European ports, Atlantic colonies, the entire emerging global economy flowed through here. Standing on the bridge meant standing at the intersection of local and global, ancient and modern, past and future. In the coldest winters, something magical happened. Those same piers that made the river so dangerous would cause it to freeze solid. Londoners would walk on water, holding frost fairs on ice thick enough to support crowds, tents, and even roasting fires. The transformation was complete, from highway to frozen wonderland, from danger to delight. For a few weeks, the Thames would become something entirely different, a parallel world existing in the same space. The bridge's final years. By the mid-1700s, Old London Bridge was dying. The painting I've reconstructed shows it during this twilight period, when centuries of weathering, fires, and the constant punishment of the river had taken their toll. Between 1756 and 1762, authorities made a radical decision: clear the bridge. All those buildings that had defined it for generations came down, one by one. The bridge was open to the sky for the first time in living memory. But here's what gets me. You can still visit this spot today. Stand on modern London Bridge, look around, and know that once, right where you're standing, was an entire universe of human experience. Births and deaths, fortunes made and lost, loves kindled and extinguished, all happening on a street built over rushing water. Through AI, I've walked those streets again, and I'm taking you with me. Buckingham House. Let me take you somewhere unexpected. To the western edge of London in the late 1600s, where open fields met the last scattered buildings of the city. Here stood Buckingham House, not yet the palace we know, just a gentleman's townhouse with gardens stretching toward actual countryside. This wasn't just a different building. This was a different concept of London itself, a city with edges, with boundaries you could walk to and cross. The contrast is staggering. While old London Bridge groaned under the weight of thousands, Buckingham House sat in relative solitude, a reminder that even this sprawling metropolis had limits. But not for long. The day London burned, September 1666. Remember that date, because it's when London died and was reborn. Imagine you're standing at Ludgate as evening falls. Ahead of you, through the ancient gate, you see old St. Paul's Cathedral, that massive medieval monument with its square tower piercing the sky. But something's wrong. The air is thick with smoke. The light is all wrong, orange and flickering. And then you realize the cathedral is burning. What started as a small fire in a bakery became an apocalypse. London in 1666 was essentially a city-sized pile of kindling. Timber buildings packed so tightly together that fire could leap from roof to roof faster than a man could run. The narrow streets became wind tunnels, feeding the flames with fresh oxygen. Within hours, entire neighborhoods were ash. The second scene I've reconstructed will haunt you. It's September 4th, evening, and you're standing across the Thames near Tower Wharf. Look left, there's London Bridge, somehow still standing. Look right, the Tower of London, narrowly escaping destruction. And in the center, dominating everything, old St. Paul's Cathedral is a pillar of flame. The fire burned for 3 days. When it finally exhausted itself, medieval London was gone. 85 churches destroyed, 13,000 houses consumed. The city that had grown organically over centuries, that twisted maze of ancient streets and timber-framed homes, erased. But here's the thing about disasters. They create opportunities. The fire cleared away centuries of crowded, unsanitary construction in one terrible sweep. It forced London to rebuild, to rethink itself, to rise from the ashes as something new. Christopher Wren's St. Paul's, the one we know today, rose on the ruins of the old. Modern London began in those flames. The Tower, where power lived and died. Rising from the riverside, the Tower of London in the 1600s was many things: fortress, treasury, arsenal, and the most feared prison in England. But it was more than the sum of these parts. It was where the machinery of royal power became visible and concrete. Think about what it meant to be imprisoned here. You weren't just locked away. You were held at the very center of state authority, surrounded by the physical embodiments of royal might. Crown jewels glittered in one chamber while you rotted in another. Weapons filled the armories while you awaited trial for treason. The contrast was deliberate, a constant reminder of your powerlessness against the throne. But the Tower was also where England kept its memory. Royal records, legal documents, the paperwork of governance stretching back generations. It was simultaneously a place of present power and preserved history, of current punishment and future judgment. Cheapside, where ceremony became politics. Now we come to 1638, and a procession through Cheapside that on the surface looks like pure pageantry, but underneath pulses with dangerous tension. The street is magnificent. Crowds press against both sides. Soldiers line the route. Temporary structures, arches, platforms, elaborate decorations transform the commercial thoroughfare into a ceremonial stage. At the center stands the Cheapside Cross, that ancient landmark around which so much of London's public life revolved. The occasion? Marie de Medici, the former Queen of France, is entering London to visit her daughter, Queen Henrietta Maria, and King Charles I. It should be a simple family reunion elevated by royal dignity. But nothing in 1638 England was simple. Henrietta Maria was Catholic, and visibly so. Her mother's visit reinforced foreign, Catholic influence at a moment when England was fragmenting along religious lines. The pageantry you're seeing, all those decorations, the carefully choreographed procession, was happening in a city increasingly suspicious of Catholic monarchy. 3 years later, England would be at war with itself. Stand on that same street today, modern Cheapside near St. Mary-le-Bow, and you're walking through a ghost story. The cross is long gone. The medieval buildings have vanished. But the street remains, carrying traffic over the same ground where politics and religion collided in silks and ceremony. Westminster, the heart of power divided. It's 1647. We're across the Thames, looking at Westminster, and England is tearing itself apart. On your left stands the old Palace of Westminster, Parliament's seat, where representatives increasingly defied their king. Beside it rises Westminster Hall, its vast hammer-beam roof sheltering trials that would reshape the nation. To the right dominates Westminster Abbey, where kings have been crowned for centuries, where monarchy was made sacred through ceremony and stone. But in 1647, these buildings represented a contradiction. Parliament met in the shadow of royal authority. Political power existed in tension with religious tradition. And at the center, the Westminster Stairs, where boats arrived constantly, carrying men whose decisions would determine whether England remained a kingdom or became something entirely new. 2 years later, King Charles I would be tried and executed. The sacred and the political, the traditional and the revolutionary, all colliding in these buildings you're looking at. Whitehall, where kings lived. The Palace of Whitehall in 1643 was staggering in scale. The largest royal residence in England, a sprawling complex where government itself happened. These weren't just the king's apartments. This was where policy was made, where courtiers schemed, where the nation's business was conducted under royal eyes. The etching I've reconstructed shows the river-facing entrance, where boats arrived at the palace steps. In an age before good roads, the Thames was how power traveled. Messages from Parliament, diplomats from foreign courts, supplies for the royal household.
So it is agreed.
Everything came by water, right to these steps. Most of Whitehall burned at the end of the 1600s. Today, only Inigo Jones's banqueting house survives. A single magnificent room standing alone, the last physical remnant of the nerve center of Stuart England. But stand there, and you're touching the same stones that witnessed the height of royal power and its eventual limitation. Richmond, where queens died. One final stop on our journey. Richmond Palace in the early 1600s was where royalty went to breathe, to escape London's crowds and disease, to live surrounded by gardens rather than petitioners. Henry VII rebuilt it. The Tudor monarchs loved it. And it's where Elizabeth I died in 1603, ending a dynasty and an era. Picture her final days, the great queen, who had ruled for 45 years, who had defeated the Spanish Armada, who had presided over England's emergence as a world power, dying not in the grandeur of Whitehall or the fortress security of the Tower, but here, in this riverside retreat. Today, Richmond Palace is mostly gone. Some walls remain, fragments of foundations, traces in the street layout. But walk the riverside paths, and you're walking where Tudor monarchs walked, where an age ended and another began. The past is never dead. Standing here now, looking back through these reconstructed scenes, I'm struck by how thin the veil really is between then and now. These weren't abstract historical events. They were lived experiences as real and immediate to the people who went through them as our own lives are to us today. Old London Bridge, crowded and dangerous and alive. The Great Fire, destroying and creating simultaneously. The Tower, where power showed its teeth. Westminster, where the modern world was born in conflict and compromise. These moments, these places, they made us. Through AI, I've walked streets that vanished centuries ago. I've stood on bridges that no longer exist. I've watched cities burn and rise again. And I try to bring you with me, to help you see and feel what it was like to live in a world both utterly alien and strangely familiar. This is just the beginning. There are countless other cities, other moments, other scenes waiting to be brought back to life. Where should we go next? What moment in history deserves to breathe again? Tell me in the comments. Let's keep building this bridge between past and present, between what was and what we can still learn from it. Because the past isn't dead. It isn't even past. It's right here, beneath our feet, in the streets we walk, in the cities we inhabit. We just need to learn to see it again. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, keep looking back so we can see forward more clearly.